And welcome to a truly maddening edition of Ben's Junk. Hey, if Mad Magazine could go for the obvious joke, so can I. Anyway, I have had to rearrange two videos to release this the week that you see it, assuming you see it when it's brand new. So it's going to kind of throw off the thesis of the next bi-week video, unfortunately. But I feel like this is going to make a better lead in to the main event instead of me coming out of it. So yeah, next week it's going to be about Mad, but not necessarily the magazine. So stay tuned for that. And it's going to be one of my history lesson episodes, and it's running pretty long. So it would have a would-be personal storytime segment and discussing my relationship with Mad Magazine, but it's a little off from the rest of the episode, and it just makes it run that much longer. But I may or may not read off my would-be voiceover for it. I'll use it at least as some sort of guide, I suppose. So anyway, yeah, we'll just talk about my relationship with Mad Magazine and my opinions on it and so on and so forth here. So anyway, this is, yeah, a suitcase, briefcase more accurately. And this is every issue of Mad, I think, that I got new at the time. I've got some back issues and some of the paperback books and stuff, and I'll whip those out a little later. But anyway, yeah, let's kick things off with Alfred E. Newman's Tanned Hide. This might be one of the more kind of tasteless Ben's Junks, come to think of it. Not necessarily by my hand this time, though. So anyway, let me just kind of discuss my relationship with Mad. I was a fairly religious, if you will, Mad reader for a good while. But at the same time, even back then, I knew I had come in at something that was well past its peak. So in this case, this is every new issue, as I mentioned, that I got. And this is all from 1995 to 2001. So let's just start at the beginning here. This is indeed the first issue I got and the actual copy thereof. So March/April of 1995. Couldn't tell you exactly when, but I do remember getting it at the 7-Eleven, or more accurately, my dad getting it for me at the 7-Eleven. And I think the logic was it looked interesting to me, but also because it seems like I was going through some sort of thing at school where I was allegedly not reading enough and all that. But I was one of those readers that it had to interest me. So yeah, I might not read, or you'd really have to crack the whip on me to read whatever was being assigned in school. And I think my dad kind of saw that, and he let me pick this up because he knew that I would go through it. I don't think he was thinking of the political stuff and all that, but, you know, it worked. I certainly won't deny that. And I'm still that kind of reader today. It helps if I have some sort of interest in it. I've never been that great a student, if you will, of it. So anyway, this is indeed the first one I ever got, and I do remember folding the Mad fold-in at some point, but it seems to have, or maybe I just tried to kind of fake it. Obviously, I'm not going to do it now. But I did take a quick look through this. This is a reference to the show ER. And invariably, the back of these 90s and early 2000s issues are the most interesting part of these things. But anyway, I don't remember if I went through a spell of not getting it, because I do remember nagging my parents quite a bit at the grocery store for the latest issue of Mad. But there is a bit of a gap here. So we have March/April, May of 95. Then we jump to April of 96. So I don't remember if I had any issues during that time. Really, this whole set, admittedly, I might have gotten rid of had I just not noticed it. It just got lost in the shuffle of everything else when I moved from Colorado in 2018. So I guess this is just one of those pleasant twists of fate as it goes. But anyway, as I mentioned, even back then, I kind of knew I was on the downside of Mad. And let me try and jump up to the first, as far as I'm concerned, real drop down. So this is the last of the old style issues, 1997. And hey, we got a picture of Dick DeBartolo on the back and Dionne Warwick. But yeah, making it look more like a tabloid. But you'll notice the next month they kicked over to this very boilerplate style, and I hated it. And apparently a lot of their readers did too, because I've got another gap in issues here, but we go up to January of 98 and then July of 98. So sometime in this period they dropped this very boilerplate look to it. And since we were looking at that July of 98 one, I just think it's kind of sad that Mad would want to try and take the piss out of South Park, something that's already taking the piss out of every other thing under the sun. So yeah, a bit of a lapse in judgment on their part. And every now and then you get kind of a clever cover, but then it just kind of starts becoming ripped from the headlines. It gets less and less interesting. So, kind of a better one. And it just starts becoming a little more obvious. Oh, hardy har har. So anyway, I did at some point nag my parents into subscribing, and it's mostly complete, certainly starting in 1998. And oh, there's one from the vault. I may have to do another round of like overplayed commercials or something. I remember that annoying pets.com puppet. So admittedly I had to kind of thumb through these at first so I don't like give away my childhood address. But I guess I had the collector gene to some degree already, because once upon a time Mad came in a plain-ish paper cover. And it started to get more political and one-sided political at that. In my opinion, if you're going to do satire, you need to be willing to truly take the piss out of both sides. And that just brings me to a bit of a rant on the state of satire today. What I see now, especially, you know, with all the political crap these days, we don't seem to be going for laughter anymore. It's always clapter. It's always preaching to the choir. So I have to roll my eyes at most of it these days. Anyway, if we get down to my final issue, sometime in this final run of mine, so April 2001, they did something that I really didn't like, because supposedly Mad was supposed to take the piss out of all sides, even though they really weren't by this point. But they were now taking ads. This is not a parody of an ad for corn nuts. It's really one. And I think there's some video game ads in here. But what I did like were these super special issues. I liked the style of the older issues. I liked the, I guess, more general humor, stuff that doesn't date before it even hits the newsstand. So obviously this is seemingly the first, at least the oldest then new copy that I've got. And it's kind of an interesting time capsule in that for a while there they were writing their circulation numbers on the magazine. So by 1996 here, they were down to a circulation of 800,000, and my collector's issue of, 662,696. Yeah, I guess they didn't consider me important enough to give me issue number 1. How dare they? But to put this in perspective, at its peak, I think it was north of 2 million. And if I'm not mistaken, by the time Mad really went under, it was down to like the low 6 figures. But among these super special sort of deals, the ones that I really loved and the ones that really caught my attention, I'm probably going to have to go way down the list here. Yep. I loved these reissues of the first issues of Mad from 1952, 53, where it was more of a Tales from the Crypt sort of thing, and it was still a proper comic as opposed to magazine. And if you know your history, the whole reason Mad became Mad Magazine was so they could get around the comics code that had been implemented in the 50s. And this issue is actually, for how much I read this one, it stayed in shockingly good condition. But I had never really read any, I guess you could say, pulp kind of stuff yet. So it stuck with me. And then just a little oddity for you at the end here. Mad TV, which even though I wasn't a huge SNL person, even I thought it was just kind of off-brand SNL. I liked the Spy versus Spy cartoons, but it seems like they did away with those pretty quickly, unfortunately. Really, that sketch comedy show, even though it ran a really long time, it's really Mad in name only. The brand of humor is way off, and you don't really get any of the stuff you would expect out of them. So anyway, I've got a massive mess off camera here, so let me clear the deck here and we'll take a look at some of the back issues that I accrued at the time and the paperbacks, and I'll just kind of wrap things up and bring you up to date, so to speak. I could have sworn I had a lot more back issues of Mad than this. I actually do have a precious few more out of this shot, but these are the prime ones, so to speak. So I must have sold them off at some point. Anyway, I managed to build up a nice little collection of these older issues when I was in like late grade, early middle school, and they were nice and cheap too. The comic book store in my neighborhood growing up would always have a back stock of stuff that was a few years old, 10 years old, and a lot of times it was less than the cover price. And they always had a great stash of true oldies. Now, unfortunately, it was never as cheap as, like, say, 35 cents for this one, but I don't think I ever paid more than $2 for any of these things. Anyway, this is the oldest issue of Mad that I've ever owned, original copy, December of 1969, and the back to Collège Jesuit, yeah. Or just a very below-the-belt swipe at college. And no, that was not a new thing back then even. But of course, this being 1969, I think you can probably tell where it's going. Now, looking through these things, I guess I was just an old soul even back then. You know, I watched a lot of Nick at Night and reruns on the local, especially UHF channels growing up. But this is where I think started getting my first taste of some of the real deep cuts. If I can find it in here, there's a parody, there it is, of Goodbye Columbus. So who else but me in the mid to late 90s would have, at my age, even known about that movie. And it's not even a very good movie. But yeah, this is kind of where some of that stuff began for me, and I've always loved Spy versus Spy. Now, of course, a lot of these were not in great condition, but it didn't really break my heart for the most part because I didn't feel bad about doing the fold-in. And we have one of the original Al Jaffe ones here. So, yeah, oh dear, the generation gap, because, you know, the Vietnam era. But yeah, for our youngins that may not be familiar, they'd have these little fold-in pieces of artwork where you'd have an internalized joke in there. Of course, these days, I suppose, if you're a die-hard collector, you could just scan that page and just cut out the middle and do it that way without ruining the magazine. Of course, I think William Gaines used to joke that with the fold-ins, it would encourage people to buy 2 copies, kind of a trash copy, if you will, to fold up and stuff, and 1 to keep nice. I don't think many people actually did that, though. So anyway, 1972 here, Alfred E. Newman in true mid-70s regalia there. So I've mentioned already that I have kind of a complicated relationship with Mad. It was these older issues that I really loved, or the super specials where they would draw upon the old stuff, because they were more clever, certainly, and also just generally more general in the humor. So this is where I kind of realized that I was watching something good dying. And I wasn't even aware of some of the big players like William Gaines at the time. So, yeah, when it came to be the early 2000s and they were putting ads and stuff in Mad, I just truly didn't care anymore, and I just let it go. And I think my own tastes had kind of evolved beyond it. I mean, I think the running joke with Mad was that it was, for like 11 to 15-year-olds? I would have been 15 when I got my last issue. So let me just get back to my own little backstory here. When Mad ended in 2018, I got quite a few notes from viewers asking how I felt about it, and I was just kind of being semi-diplomatic about it, because my real thought, which I did not share at the time because I thought it would be kind of in bad taste, despite the style of Mad, was that, well, yeah, it's about time. If you've seen an issue of Mad since the early 2000s or even the late 90s, it's pretty bad news. It's always the low-hanging fruit. It's very one-sided. It's not there anymore. So then, of course, they restarted Mad just like 2 or 3 months later, and I think it lasted a year. And since then, they're still making them, but they are, as far as I know, all old material. But to add insult to injury, it is post-2000 material. So it's not even the prime stuff that they keep reusing. So, yeah, my attitude towards Mad today is just let it die. Let it die with what little dignity it has left. I know that's kind of a weird thing to say about Mad, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from on that one. Anyway, just to quickly thumb through these, we'll have a little bit of foreshadowing for next week here, so maybe you can pick out at least some of what next week is going to be about. That's a good one. Now, when I got the Mad Bites It disc in '96, one of the old tunes on it was Barely Alive, one of the tunes on the, I think, final proper so-called Mad album. But it's unique in that it was on a flexi disc, and a real flexi disc, not an Evatone sheet. There is a slight difference, at least. But the big bummer when I would find these issues in the bin at the comic book place was they never had the records. I really did want to hear the rest of Mad Disco, and it's only been in the YouTube era that I've been able to finally hear it. And unfortunately, I kind of looked on Fleabay for issues of this with the record intact, or maybe just a standalone copy, and it's always just far more than I really want to pay. And you kind of want like the flexi disc to be mint, if you will, because those things don't really hold up too terribly well. But yeah, this probably won't even be readable, but one of my favorite back covers, going to the disco so you can have a bunch of loud music and bright lights and flashing lights and induce medical problems. Anyway, this is the last of the back issues that I got. This is from October of '88, and it's because I was a huge Double Dare fan as a kid. And oh dear, Alpha. Nobody tell Nick from Found Footage Fest. Anyway, I remember being a little ticked at it, even though there is a decent grain of truth to it. So here's the last page of the Double Dare parody, because it goes towards the admittedly kind of thin premise and the at times dangerous obstacle course stuff and physical challenge stuff. So yeah, but it did kind of rub me the wrong way as a kid. But at the same time, it's making you kind of think and like, yeah, maybe there is a little bit of truth to that. And I think that's one thing that good comedy is to do, to challenge you just a touch. So anyway, let me take another quick cut here. We'll take a quick look at my little stack of Mad paperbacks and we'll call it a day. With one exception, this is the collection of Mad paperbacks that I picked up in late elementary and early middle school. Now, there was this all too short-lived little used bookstore within walking distance of my parents' house. And so I would go over there, and once in a while, I'd get lucky and find one of these Mad books in there. And I don't think I ever paid more than $1 for them. But anyway, this one up top here, Hopping Mad, is the one and only of this stack that is not from that period when I was getting these. This is a much later thrift store find. But I did find it kind of amusing. I was admittedly thumbing through some of the issues here, you know, so I'd have some clue what I was talking about when I started making this video. But there's actually an ad for Hopping Mad in the December 1969 issue, so a little synchronicity there. Anyway, this kind of falls flat to me. Sing Along with Mad. As much as I love song parodies, it's no fun when you're just reading the lyrics. And also, this book is from 1970, and some of the songs were kind of deep cuts and oldies back then, so you really have to know your music to get a lot of this. Of course, in 1970, you could get away with There's No Business Like Show Business, or Good Night, Sweetheart, Good Night, The Platters. But other things, Born Free, you could get away with then. I don't think too many people would get that now. What are some other ones in here? Get Me to the Church on Time might have fallen a bit flat. On the Street Where You Live, I guess that still would have been recent enough, but yeah, kind of one of those oldies that didn't stick too well. But anyway, this particular one just so happens to have the very faded, unfortunately, stamp of that used bookstore and the price. I don't think I ever paid more than $1 for these. So yeah, it was a good thing while it lasted, but that store went belly up pretty quickly, unfortunately. Now, of course, Mad would put out little paperbacks devoted to some of their artists and writers. So we've gotten all Don Edwing one here. I've got two of the Al Jaffe ones here. And this one doesn't even really mention Mad. You have to dig through it and find out. And I don't even know if a lot of this appeared in Mad, but the brand of humor is there, certainly. But my personal favorite of the two Al Jaffes that I've got, far and away, was the Snappy Answers to Stupid Questions book. And I've seen some of the other ones of these just kind of online and around over the years, but this is the only book that I've got of those. And when I was picking these up, it was probably right around the time Bill Engvall was getting big. And of course, his whole hook was, here's your sign. Somebody asks a dumb question and he'd give a dumb kind of snarky answer to it. So I'll let you read that for yourself. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Bill Engvall. I think he's a terrific storyteller, and I wish him a happy retirement too. And yeah, but you know, he needed a hook to get his foot in the door, so all is forgiven. But yeah, if you really want the original proto here's your sign kind of humor, there it is. We got a Don Martin book, and he had a pretty distinctive style. And I don't have a Mort Drucker one, but he usually drew Alfred E. Newman on these things. I'm sure the cover to this one intrigued me at the time. But this last one is the one that truly holds a place in my blackened heart. Son of Mad Sucks. And I got in trouble in school for reading this. I'm amazed it didn't get confiscated, actually. Or maybe it didn't, I just got it back. Yeah, you weren't supposed to say sucks, or reading anything that says sucks, derogatory, even though it's a pun here, it's a vampire pun. But yeah. So, yeah, you can kind of see why maybe I wasn't the most eager reader in school, because I had my own interests. But anyway, that's going to be it for this Ben's Junk. I think I've gone on too long, actually. So all I'm going to say here is join me next week, and we'll take a kind of deep dive into some facets of the Mad personality that you might not think of quite as often.